The general rules. How many commandments are in the Old Testament? Does anybody know? At least 10. Well done. Scholars count 613 commandments in the Old Testament. That's a lot of rules. That's a lot of commandments to try to keep track of. And it's really great business if your business is to make sure that people are knowing and following the rules. Lawyers make a bang for their buck because they know all of the rules, right? And if they don't, then they'll charge you for the hour and while they find out what the rule is, and then they'll tell you. It's really convenient. It's a really great business model. So the more rules, kind of the better. Well, John Wesley decided that that's not how he's going to set up the United Methodist or the Methodist movement. In fact, he felt provoked that there are only three. There should only be three rules, what they call general rules that apply to everybody around Methodism. And maybe you saw, but maybe you know, what is the first general rule of the church? Does anybody know? Do no harm. Very good. Do no harm. And that sounds pretty easy and straightforward until you get into it. And so people would always ask, like Jesus got asked, well, who is my neighbor? John Wesley, what does it mean to do no harm? So I won't read everything that Wesley wrote about this, but here are some of the things that he thought were top of mind when regarding do no harm. First one, taking the name of God in vain, the profaning the day of the Lord, either by doing ordinary work therein or by buying or selling. Number 2, drunkenness. Number 3, slaveholding. 4, fighting, quarreling, brawling, brother going to law with his brother, returning evil for evil. The buying of selling of goods that have not been paid for. Uncharitable or unprofitable conversation. The putting of gold and costly apparel. The taking such diversions as cannot be used in the name of Lord Jesus, singing those songs or reading those books which do not tend to the knowledge of God, because doing these things we know is not of the glory of God. Again, I won't go through it all, but when you read Wesley, he had some very kind of clear understandings of what he thought do no harm meant. We can quabble with those today, and maybe we would add some of our own, and maybe we could detract some of our own. I don't know. But that's part of the beauty of the United Methodist Church, is being able to kind of argue and debate and discuss, what does it mean to do no harm? That's great in the ideal, but when we get down to the practical, what does that mean? So the next general rule, maybe you know the next general rule. What do you think the next general rule is? If the first one is do no harm, what might the second general rule be? So what's really clever about Wesley is he's like a parent, and whenever you're a parent and you're telling your children, hey, don't do that, and if you only told them what not to do, right, that becomes problematic. So his first rule, do no harm, great. Well, what should we do then? Very good, yeah, good. Next slide. Do good. Swing and easy home run there. Do good. Again, I will not list out all of the things, but in his writings, in his journals, and in the Book of Discipline, it says, by doing good, by being in every kind merciful after their power, as they have opportunity, doing good of every possible sort, and as far as possible to all people, to their bodies, to the ability which God has given, by giving food to the hungry, clothing the naked, visiting, helping them that are sick or imprisoned, to their souls, by instructing, reproving, exhorting, all we have empty discussion with, trampling underfoot that enthusiastic doctrine that we are not to do good unless our hearts are free to do it. So Wesley really argued against this very idea where if my heart wasn't in it, then I guess I shouldn't do it. You know, follow your passion is kind of a derivative of that. If you kind of follow your passion and do the good, but if it's not really in your heart to do it, then you can kind of avoid doing it. Wesley says, no, that's kind of garbage. That's not what doing good means. I have a child, and I've got a couple of them, and both of them, at different stages of their life, thought that brushing their teeth was ridiculous. They thought that it wasn't warranted, it wasn't needed. Dad, one of them said, I'm going to lose all these teeth anyway. What does it matter? His heart wasn't in it. He didn't understand it. He didn't believe it. He didn't find any value in it. for himself, right? So we decided as parents to say, yeah, you're right. Your heart's not in it, son. Phooey on brushing your teeth. In fact, let's just gum up all of your teeth with candies. Of course we didn't, right? We said, no. Even if your heart is not in it, there is a value within this practice. Abraham Joshua Heschel said that the practice purifies the motive. And it's this idea that doing the thing purifies whatever, even perhaps ill intent, you may have in it. So you might hate your neighbor. Real piece of jerk. And every day or every week, you decide, I'm going to take my neighbor, it's a small thing, I'm just going to take my neighbor's trash can up to their garage to help them out. Over time, right, the practice purifies the motive. The hatred or animus or frustration that you may have with your neighbor slowly starts to change, right? So, first rule, do no harm. Second rule, do good. And the third rule, I promise you won't get because it's weird, but there you are. Attend upon the ordinances of God. That's how Wesley wrote it. Attend upon the ordinances of God. And then the church some years ago decided to kind of reinterpret that as stay in love with God, which is, I don't know if that's any more or less clarifying, to stay in love with God. But what Wesley was suggesting is these ordinances or these spiritual practices. Do no harm, do good, and work these spiritual disciplines, these spiritual practices. Some of those spiritual practices include things like attending worship, public worship, ministry of the word, either by reading or expounding, so like reading the Bible, right? Communion, the Lord's Supper, as Wesley called it, private prayer, family prayer, communal prayer, searching the Scriptures. Searching the Scriptures is different from just reading the Bible. That's a little bit different. Fasting and abstinence, and something else that he called conferencing, which we won't get into today, and lots of Wesley scholars debate what he meant by that, but conferencing as well. So there is these different spiritual practices that Wesley said are essential to what it means to be a Methodist. Don't do harm, do good, and attend to the ordinances of God, or stay in love with God. Do these spiritual practices. So I'm going to pause right there for just a second. And that's it. Those are the rules. Those are the rules of the church. There are other refining pieces and kind of things that kind of guide our behaviors, or in the Book of Discipline, there are other structural things that we follow. But the general rules, the rules that apply to everybody, there's only 3, which is a bit different than 613. Less than the Jewish tradition, but frankly more than Jesus, right? Jesus had the one that he married 2 together, right? So we're somewhere in the middle there, between overly onerous and essentializing. We're somewhere in the middle, which I think speaks quite profoundly to the United Methodist way, period. We're never really one way or the other. We're kind of trying to figure it out here in the middle, right? Doing our best, as close to Jesus as we can, knowing that we're not Jesus, but somewhere in the middle. Does that make sense? Doing our best.